I want to turn to another excerpt of American Casino that deals with the targeting of minority communities in Baltimore. This clip begins with Robert Strupp of the Community Law Center in Baltimore.
There seems to be enough evidence to suggest that minorities were put into these loans and deceived and misled into unsuitable loan products. Some of the deception that home buyers found themselves in is both when they got to closing, and they were being told right up until the loan closing that their payment was going to be, say, $1,000 a month, and then they get to the closing and they're sitting and they're looking at the documents, and all of a sudden it says your monthly payment is going to be $1,500 a month or $1,800, or whatever the much higher number is. The confusion is that they weren't being told that they were going to have to escrow for the real estate taxes or the hazard insurance on their home. Now, on the flip side of that, we also have people who were being told when they refinance their loans that we could get a lower payment. What they weren't being told is that where they were currently paying the taxes and insurance on the new loan, they would not.
So the purchase price is $135, and then the interest rate is 11.125. So it was 108 and 27. The large loan is 6.6%, and then on this one, if this is the smaller loan, the second one, this is the one that's 11.125. And as far as I know, it hasn't adjusted yet.
We got so lax in the way in which we conduct these closings that they were being conducted at people's homes, by notaries. You could do a real estate closing by meeting this notary in the parking lot of a shopping center and do it on the hood of your car. There's nobody to ask questions of. There was the thickness of these documents is like a phone book in any given city, and there's no time for the borrower to even be able to digest what they're being asked to sign. And in very many cases, they're doing this late on their way home from work, so they don't have to take off from work. They have to pick up their children at daycare, and otherwise there's late fee penalties and that. There's just not an opportunity for so many of the folks who would not be in a position to understand what they were signing to do so. And there are even folks who are intelligent and trained as lawyers and in the real estate profession who admit that they don't understand some of the jargon that's in these documents. So how can you expect the average person to? It's a myth to say that, these documents were signed voluntarily by people who knew what they were signing. I don't buy that.
These loans are incredibly complex. In fact, we've looked at loan documents here, and counselors here will look at them and go, they can't figure them out. And they've been looking at loan documents for years in their lives. And there's a clause somewhere in it that they can't, it adjusts at it's based on a certain rate, it's tied to some interest rate or some treasury note of whatever that is very complex. Adjustable rate mortgages that only adjust one way, upward.
And how much is the payment on the first?
Even when a housing counselor was part of the process, frequently families would get to the closing table and suddenly were faced with a loan product that they didn't know about when they signed the real estate contract.
So he's already not going to make it.
I don't think some of the clients understood the mortgage they were getting. I don't think they understood that their income wouldn't support the loan. They were being told lots of different things to entice them into the mortgage, and I don't know who should pay for that, but I certainly don't think the homeowner should be.
That was Kara Stretch, a housing counselor at St. Ambrose, an excerpt from the documentary American Casino, directed by Leslie Coburn, co-produced with Andrew Cockburn, both in our studio today as American Casino opens in New York at the Film Forum tonight. That's Wednesday night. Leslie, this description of the complexity, and then I think about the New Yorker review, who said, when the Coburns turn to victims, they absolve them of responsibility for their troubles, which seems no better than a partial truth. Your response?
Well, I think that overall the New Yorker was very, very kind to us. I mean, David, he loved the film, so I don't want to be too hard on them. But I think that we heard so much, all of us heard so much, that it was the borrower's fault. How could they be so irresponsible to take out these mortgages that they couldn't afford? So we really spent a lot of time, months, talking to people who were in the trenches, like Strupp, like Kara Stretch, who made it clear to us that, one, when you have this mortgage, the mortgage, they were, as Strepp explains, for working people, it's very hard to take time out of your day. So these things were scheduled at the end of the day. You had to pick up your kids at daycare. You didn't have time to read the phone book size document. And in fact, none of us read that document. And as he points out, and the housing counselors, that they don't even understand this stuff because each document was different, tied to all kinds of really obscure numbers that no one can understand, and certainly not the borrower. People are not given the opportunity. They were enticed into this, as Cara says.
Yes, I mean, and quite often they'd be told, their payment will be so and so much, and then they get to the closing and they say, oh, the payment will be different, or even, as Denzel explains in the film, he got his first bill.
Denzel was a school teacher.
Denzel, the school teacher, and it's more. And they say, oh, we didn't tell you that you had to pay, escrow and insurance, which should have been in the note. I mean, that was a very common trick, just to make the payment look smaller and to entice people in.
And the fact that most people who get subprime loans actually qualify for prime loans?
In 2006, it was 61%, according to the Federal Reserve at one point. So it's... yes, I mean, the whole, any loan officer will tell you, if they're being honest, that the whole point was to get people into subprime loans because people up the chain made more money that way, whether or not the person had the income and other qualifications to be a prime borrower.
We had Elizabeth Jacobson on from Wells Fargo, who was really motivated when she saw her CEO on television saying we don't do subprime loans, and she was the head of the division. And she said, for one thing, the loan officers got something like $5,000 or $6,000 for each subprime loan, and maybe $1,000 for the prime loan.
Precisely, and so on up the line. I mean, for way up in Wall Street, for the bonds, for the instruments they were floating and selling, subprime was better, more yield. So the whole system was tilted to pushing people into these subprime loans.
The heart of your story, I think, are the personal stories that are told. American Casino tells these wrenching personal stories of people, mainly African American, who lost their homes. Joining us.